Welcome to the Dear Applicants podcast, where we help aspiring students navigate the complex and often overwhelming world of university applications. Hello, students and parents, and welcome to Dear Applicants, a show where we walk you through the ins and outs of the college admissions process to both the US and the UK. I'm your host, Jonathan, and with me today is Megan, one of our profile building and university consulting students. Megan studied at the Australian International School in KL before moving over to UWC Dover for 11th and 12th grade, and has been working with us for the past couple of years now. But most importantly, where are you going to be going in a couple months?
Cornell.
Cornell, yeah, she got into Cornell ED and will be matriculating in the fall. Yep. And we're all very, very excited for her. But thank you so much for joining us today, Megan. Maybe to start us off, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Maybe the pre-Singapore Megan, right? So growing up in KL and schooling over there.
Yeah, so thank you so much for having me. I grew up in KL and then I actually spent 4 years in Indonesia. So I actually studied at ACS Jakarta.
Oh.
Yeah. And then after that, I moved back to KL when my dad's work changed. And then I attended the Australian International School there for, I think, 9 years before finally moving here to Singapore, to UWC.
So a really, really long time then. And I guess what precipitated that move? Why to Singapore and why to UWC particularly?
Yeah, so my previous school, it was an Australian school. So we followed the HSC, which is an Australian curriculum. And the HSC is quite different from the IB. So the subjects that were offered at my school, I would say, were quite restrictive in a sense. They may have suited my other classmates, but I felt that they didn't really, it wasn't really what I was interested in. So just for context, if I had stayed at my previous school, I would have had to take all 3 sciences. I was planning to take all 3 sciences, and right now I'm taking 0 natural sciences. So
what is the science that you're taking at IB?
I'm taking computer science.
Oh, computer science.
Yeah,
right,
but if I had stayed there, I would have had to take physics, chemistry, biology, and I'm not a very natural science person. Yeah. So
that's not true. Not STEM generally, more natural science.
Yeah, I feel that I am a STEM person, but I'm not very interested in chemistry, physics, bio. Yeah. So I felt that it would have been a bit restrictive to just stick in that curriculum, and I wanted to try something different. That was more interesting for me. So I decided to move to the IB.
And why UWC? Just out of curiosity, right?
I was considering other IB schools in KL, but most of them were too small or were quite new, so they didn't really have that support that UWC has.
Okay.
And I also briefly considered the UK, but the UK,
boarding school in the UK.
Yeah, boarding school in the UK. But I mean, that's really far away. And my parents and my grandparents, especially because it was during COVID, they wanted me to go somewhere a bit closer. So I decided to look at Singapore, and UWC was one of the only boarding schools there. So I decided to go to UWC.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. And before the camera started rolling, I just found out that you were a boarder, and I went to boarding school as well. So I was immediately very interested. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that experience? Because I think it's something that not a lot of students who study in Singapore experience, right? That boarding school, or actually, students globally don't really experience that boarding school life. It's only staying away from home is only something they experience at university, right?
Yeah.
And then not even if you're going to a university that's close to you. So how was that?
Boarding is super unique. So I have 3 roommates right now. 2 other Malaysians and 1 Kenyan. And last year I was roommates with a Serbian, a Jamaican, and a Colombian. So definitely very, very, very diverse.
Yeah.
And boarding is, when I first got to boarding, it was very different from my life before, obviously, because my parents were there, supporting me the whole time. I didn't need to worry about things like laundry, for example. So when I first got to boarding, I didn't know how to iron a shirt. And on my first day of school...
I still don't. I don't blame you.
The day I got there, I actually had to go to school right away, I think. Because I arrived sometime around lunch. And so they just gave me a shirt, and I didn't know how to iron it, and it was all like crumpled and everything. And one of the day parents there had to teach me how to iron a shirt for the first time in my life. So yeah, it was definitely a bit challenging at first, just getting used to living independently, like living with so many different people from different countries. But it's been a great experience.
And how do you think that experience of living away from home? Because then I know from experience, massive change, right?
Yeah.
From having, support with a lot of stuff as simple as laundry and like having food put on the table every day to then, well, I'm sure there's cafeteria at UWC, but moving into that whole thing of living alone and managing your own life. Do you feel as though that's helped mature you in any sense?
Yeah, definitely. I know before I moved into boarding, my mom was quite concerned about how I would fare in university, especially considering that I can't cook,
Right.
And still can't. Although I guess I'm meant to say that boarding has improved my cooking.
Yeah, that's okay. I still can't cook after boarding school and university, so it's okay.
Yeah, at least I know how to do the laundry now. I know how to iron now. I would say I've become a lot more independent in other senses as well. Just managing my schoolwork myself, stuff like that. Because there's really there are restrictions, but in a huge way, you have to decide yourself like how you want to use your time, and that's entirely up to you. Like if you spend 10 hours in one day playing video games or whatever, the house parents aren't going to tell you, like that's not allowed. Like go back to your studies. Like you really have to manage it yourself.
Right. And speaking of moving to Singapore and then figuring out how to use your time, you've had a pretty long relationship with us, right? With IvyPrep and with Stanley, one of your consultants, and then ultimately a US consultant, Alex. How did you guys find us? How did you and your dad find us?
Yeah, so IvyPrep was recommended to me by a family friend.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and around the time it was recommended, I was just starting grade 11. So I was already looking at applying to university, like trying to plan out what I needed to do. So it was the perfect time to, I guess, go and explore and, try university consulting. Yeah.
And why end up working with us? Just out of curiosity.
So the first session I attended, I was actually looking more at the UK. So from this first session, I think we were looking at Oxbridge interviews and the kinds of like interesting questions that they would ask students. So I was asked this very tricky question. I don't really remember what it was now, but it was.
Was it the one about the bicycle or the umbrella?
No, it was something about speed.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, it was very complex, very confusing for me. And I wasn't sure how to approach it. But then, just hearing and just like discussing the approach that students should take when listening to this kind of question, I thought like, oh, these people know what they're doing.
Well, I'd hope so. So we've been working with you for a really, really long time now, and then a lot of that was working on your profile building or supporting you with that, which leads me to, I guess this is the activities that you did both personally as well as in school. So what were some of the things that you had dedicated to yourself to, right? So extracurricular activities, CCAs, as we call them in Singapore. What were some of the things that you were up to?
Yeah, so I think I was a bit abnormal in that I didn't really participate in any school extracurricular activities.
Oh, at all?
So I joined 2 clubs quite briefly, but I was never in any leadership positions. And then I did community service and sports as well, but I was never really super involved in them. I actually don't think I put any of them on my extracurricular list when I was applying.
Okay.
Yeah. So most of my activities were kind of outside of school, like my own thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's really interesting, right? I think that's quite atypical for a student, or you said abnormal for a student to list down no activities that they did in school. That's really interesting. So what happened there? Like, what were the activities what activities were you doing outside of school?
So the main activities I think that I was focused on in my activity list were this sticker business that I started during the pandemic, as well as a mobile app that I developed.
Okay. You want to tell us a little bit more about both?
Yeah. So during the pandemic, when it first started, there was online learning. We were all stuck at home with nothing to do, basically. And I had the idea of creating this sticker shop with my friend. So at that point
This
in
is
time,
back home in KL.
yeah, back home in KL. So around 2020. At that point in time, I was very interested in calligraphy and brush lettering.
Okay.
So the sticker shop actually started because I was interested in making calligraphy stickers. And my friend was also interested in making stickers, but more so like cartoons or small doodles or whatever. So we started off by just drawing them by hand, and then on tablets, like printing them out, cutting them out, selling them just as hand cut stickers. And eventually it kind of grew into this much bigger thing. And I also personally started venturing into drawing some of my own stickers, not just doing calligraphy. And then
has that continued till the present day?
Oh,
so the sticker company sort of grown over time then.
Yeah.
So and do you sell these stickers online? Oh, how does it work? Okay.
I sell them on my own website now. So it originally started as hand cut stickers, like I said, but then we eventually moved to buying a sticker cutting machine.
Okay.
Yeah, and then eventually we outsourced them to a Korean manufacturer.
Okay, so there's really a story of growth.
Yeah.
Before we continue, I would like to take a quick break to remind you to subscribe to our podcast and leave us a review on your favorite platform. Your feedback helps us improve and to reach a wider audience to provide further insight into this arduous journey. Also, if you have any questions or suggestions for future episodes, feel free to email us at our email linked in the description below. We'd love to hear from you. And so everything you set up yourself, so I mean, of course, the design and ultimately the printing and cutting, but also setting up your own website and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
And how much of that happened when you were in KL and how much of that happened after you moved to Singapore and sort of alongside the IB?
I think a lot of the foundations were built in KL. So the sticker cutter, I bought that in KL. That was happening in KL for the longest time. And then we moved on to the manufacturer, I think, when I was still in KL. But then because of the COVID restrictions, we weren't actually allowed, we weren't able to ship internationally. So we were only able to do local shipping and to Singapore. And it was once I got to Singapore really that the business kind of expanded a lot more. So to international shipping. And then now my stickers are actually sold in a shop here in Singapore. So I'll say it kind of
You have to tell me where after this episode so I can buy some and stick on my laptop. Tell us a little bit about the app.
So the app is also related to the sticker store. As someone who booths at events, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the term booth, but
right. You have a booth at all these different events.
So there are lots of kind of arts and crafts or small business, small shop related events, and shops will basically run a booth there and sell their products. And I've been to several, both as a consumer and as like a person selling. But I noticed that it was quite difficult to keep track of these events. So from the selling point of view, it would have been really helpful to kind of know who the other shops are at that event, just to kind of coordinate like, this event is going to happen and this event is going to have shops that are similar to mine. So I should also go and sell at that event, at that particular event. But there was no way of seeing that. It was basically just by, you would have to directly ask whatever shops like, where are you boothing? And that's quite, it's a bit too direct.
A bit tedious as well, I think.
A bit tedious. Yeah. And from the consumer point of view, it was also, a lot of people told me that it was quite difficult to find upcoming events. So you would have to follow whatever shops you were interested in and just watch their social media feed until you saw a post saying like, I'm going to be at XXX event. But it would be that's quite tedious as well. So
and also then you're sort of like, will they be there at this event, or is it going to be stores that I'm not really interested in? Should I waste my time going?
Yeah, so it's quite difficult to keep track of all of these things that are going on. So I decided to develop an app that basically organizes and lists upcoming arts and crafts or like small shop related events in Singapore, as well as the shops who are going to be attending.
Okay. It's really cool. So sort of this is something that you're embedded in, that you've experienced, you've actively boothed. So then you sort of in this industry or in this market, you identify that there's this issue and then you build this thing to fix it. So what's the impact of that app? Has it been built? Has it been, is it live? Are people using it?
Yeah, so it's been built. It's been released on the App Store as well as the Google Play Store.
Okay. What's it called?
It's called SG Boots.
SG Boots. Okay.
Yeah. Currently, it is being worked on. So although the first version does work, there are still major things I want to improve on before it's kind of relaunched. Not relaunched, but before the second version goes out, which will be a lot better.
Got it. And when you were working with your Head Start consultant, did they help support you with this, or was this entirely independent?
So I first thought of creating an app during Head Start. Head Start was what prompted me to more deliberately think of, what I could do to kind of develop my profile as well as explore things that I was interested in, which is computer science.
Got it.
But I moved on from Head Start to the US admissions process before I started developing SG Boots.
So this was on the side.
Yeah. So it was basically just independent after that.
Cool. And what else sort of came out of Head Start? Because the app is an interesting bit, right? It sort of marries your interest in or your existing work and interest in the sticker company and in your investment in sort of making that grow to what you want to do, which is computer science. So what else came out of that?
So I think Head Start definitely made me think more deliberately about what I could do to kind of develop my profile. So I would say I got a lot more involved in things like linguistics competitions as well after doing Head Start, because that was kind of identified as an area I wanted to explore more.
Why was that? Why was that an area you wanted to explore more?
So I took a linguistics summer course a few years ago, and I was really interested in it and kind of wanted to explore it more. But linguistics isn't really a very easy thing to study. Like in high school, there's no curriculum subject which is like linguistics, whatever. It's just foreign languages. So I began to look more into more linguistics related opportunities. So I found these linguistics Olympiads. And I've been participating in them every year since then.
And that's not the only Olympiad that you've been participating in, right? There have been some math competitions as well. What took you in that more academic direction? Was it just, I'm good at this, let's get some, let's have this vetted and get that gratification of winning an Olympiad? Or was it you were looking for the challenge?
I think my school back in KL, the Australian school, had always quite strongly pushed maths Olympiads.
Okay.
So from already from grade 4, grade 5, they were already encouraging us to join all of these. And I think personally, I also kind of wanted to push myself beyond the curriculum. Like I found maths in school really fun, but it was missing that aspect of, just creativity, like challenge. And that was what I found in maths Olympiads.
Are there any other challenges that you've gone out and tried to look for?
I also joined the computer science Olympiads.
Okay.
Although that was a bit different because I realized that joining computer science Olympiads actually made me realize that wasn't the kind of computer science I wanted to do.
Why was that?
So computer science Olympiads were very much like just how to use code in the most efficient way possible to solve
one particular
problem. And I didn't find them very interesting. I didn't find them very fun. And I wasn't sure why, because, I really do enjoy computer science, but it's like, why is this not giving me any joy? So I realized that I was more interested in creating tangible products. So like apps and stuff like that, that actually help users Yeah.
So that's pretty cool. So I think part of your exploration was in this field of Olympiads, and of course, a segment of it was CS Olympiads, and that helped you determine, well, I like CS, but I don't like this bit. I'm more
Yeah.
interested in B, right? There's this other much more wider creative bit, the whole creating the app bit. So that's really cool. I think it's really important that students, and a lot of students don't do this, right? They hope that they're hitting goals with one particular activity that they do, or maybe two particular activities, and that'll carry them through and really inform the rest of what they write about or what they're interested in at the university level. But it's important that you cast your net wide, maybe not too wide, but wide enough that you're finding activities that you enjoy and things that you don't. And I think you've done that pretty effectively. And all while balancing, the life of a boarder as well as the IB. So that's really cool. Are there any activities that you haven't told us about or haven't told me about yet that you feel were really cool or that was important to you personally or to your applications?
So I also did volunteer. I also have been volunteering at a refugee school in KL for several years now. So during my holidays, when I go back to KL, and also when I was staying in KL before, during those holidays, I'd also just go to the school and help out there. So whether it be with admin work or teaching the younger kids things like phonetics, phonics. Yeah, and reading and stuff like that.
Okay. And do you have any advice for students who, whether they're in an international school or local school or even back at home, students who are walking in your path, right, or sort of coming up to 11th grade and 12th grade? Do you have any advice for them in terms of how they should structure or try and think about their profile building journeys?
Actually, I think before grade 11, it's best not to think too much about building a profile. It's more important to kind of explore and figure out, what you're really interested in, stuff like that. Because once you get to grade 11 and grade 12, more opportunities will open up to build your profile, to get more experience in the areas that you're interested in. But in order to get experience in those areas, you need to know what they are first. Because there's no point in wasting time as well on something that you don't truly want to pursue or you're not passionate about.
So exploration just to figure out what those areas of passion are before you isolate and try and dig deep. And of course, things come along the way, like, for example, the sticker company, right?
Yeah.
That wasn't you going, what should I do for university?
Yeah, definitely.
It was just like, I want to make stickers and sell them with a friend. And it ended up being this really big thing that's taken up, substantial part of your high school life, and it ended up being really cool. That's all for today's episode of Dear Applicants. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope that you found the content valuable and insightful. If you'd like to learn more about our guests or the topics we discussed, be sure to check out our show notes for links and further resources.